Hey, Jamie.
Hello, Peter.
I don't know why that surprises you that I say hello.
I guess today it's because we're recording a little bit on the early side.
That's true. We have lots of things going on in our lives.
I'm impressed and grateful for you giving me the grace to do this early so that I can do
great.
the other things today.
I love it. Okay, so I want to start off with a question for you. Our guest today on An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast, our guest is Mike Nelson. I had a great conversation with Mike, and he was a superintendent in Enumclaw, Washington.
Yeah.
And had spent his entire career there. So that is pretty exciting. And this is the question that I wanted to ask you. When you think about your time as a teacher and leader, who comes to mind for you as just that absolute light for kids that you just saw that they were just amazing in terms of supporting kids, helping kids, creating that they were their guide, their light, their support? No, the best words to describe these sort of heroes, I guess is the word. A kid's hero. Who comes to mind for you?
The first person that I thought of that came to my mind was my creative writing teacher in high school. Her name was Jo Greiner.
Jo Greiner. So Jo Greiner's name is now in the world for all to hear. I love it.
Yeah. I think so. I'll tell you how she made me feel, and then I'll talk about how I think it impacted others. But she made me feel like a really good writer, even in improvement, right? Not that my writing was inherently good. I'm 15. But she made me feel like I could write and that I should write, and that every time a new iteration of that writing, it got better. And so I thought I was just the good writer in the class. And I actually, one of my best friends, who I just saw, one of the guys that I grew up with, made him feel the same way. We used to talk about how great she was, and
what a gift!
I know. So that I'm like, oh, did she do that to everybody?
She lifted kids up. Yeah, that's awesome. If you were to ask me who comes to mind for me, there are actually three.
Three.
They played very similar roles in the schools that I worked in. I'm going to put three names out into the universe. Miriam Hassenclever was the counselor where I was the principal. I was the assistant principal and the principal. And Miriam was the most amazing advocate for kids and families, and would never take no for getting them the services that they needed and deserved. I mean, she would wait in the bushes, lay in wait for a parent to come home, and she'd pop out and say, "All right, how you doing? Let's talk." And so she just really modeled for me just a never-ending energy for children. And so then it led me to think of two other individuals, Kathy Cox and Lisa Turner, who were homeschool communicators. Now, in the district where I served, in 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education, and the Columbia Public Schools in Missouri probably didn't decide to do anything until about the 60s. And so the school district, when it decided to integrate schools, really closed all the African-American schools. And so it really wasn't integration as much as, they just closed all access to community and then said, welcome to this new school that is completely foreign. And as you might expect, children really struggled with navigating a system that was completely foreign to them. And so the district, in response, created the home visitor program, then turned into homeschool communicators. And so these were professionals in the community who would support families in understanding the system, navigating the system, and all those kinds of things. Fast forward all 50 years, and then I become superintendent. And the homeschool communicator program existed, and it was really a tremendous resource for families. And so Lisa Turner, Kathy Cox, and all of the homeschool communicators would help families get the services they needed, utility support. They ran a homeschool communicator basketball league on the weekends. They just were above and beyond for children. And so when I think about our guest today, Mike Nelson, and he really talks about how it really was one individual who helped transform the success and opportunity for students, Native American students in his school district, that to me was profound. So it really sort of prompted me to say, Jamie, who comes to mind for you who never said die for kids? And I really wanted to put into the universe those three names as well.
It's so interesting. I picked the one that impacted me as a teacher. I'm interested to know, who would I pick otherwise? The question's really actually, though simple, very profound in that you could really expand this beyond the teacher. He talks about his mom. You'll hear him talk about his mom, and definitely my grandparents did that for me.
Yes, so appreciative. Yes, you've really talked a lot about your family and how the influence that they've had on you. And you've really taught me. I really do think that my getting to know you has really impacted me to think about, I often said to my kids, be an ambassador for our family, but it was kind of surface. And my conversations with you have really helped me really think about our name is a gift to us and we have a responsibility to that. And to me, I'm so grateful to be thinking about that often.
I appreciate that very deeply. That's a big compliment. Big compliment.
Can I tell you, as I was thinking about people who have impacted me and students, I can't help it, maybe it's just my nature, is also to think about who is the worst, and so I won't even say her name because she doesn't deserve it, but she was a state representative who used to claim on the House floor in Missouri that I was allowing kids to dress up as cats, as furries or Furbies or something, and use litter boxes in the school. And I would say, could you please send me a picture of that happening? Because every kid's got a phone and every teacher would likely complain that I've allowed a child to just use a litter box in class. And it was always, no, I was told by a constituent that this is happening. Wouldn't you think that's not, wouldn't you question that? No, I trust this person. So I'm not going to say her name, but I want to say this is terrible of me. But while I'm thinking of all these amazing people who had such a profound positive impact, hey, those who are trying to tear down public education, cut it out. Cut it out.
Please. Can I share mine? And then you can decide whether you want to keep it or not. When I was a teacher in middle school, there was a teacher who, oh God, he was so full of himself. He could not get out of his own way. And so in the teacher's lounge, there were quotes, like famous people quotes. He had printed out quotes of himself. So it would say, keep reading, and then his name.
That's actually kind of funny.
Oh my God. What a jerk. This guy was such a jerk.
I just imagine some of them. When using a toothpick, cover your mouth.
Oh my goodness.
All right, usually we wait to the end, but this would be a good one for comments. What would be your adage? What would you put on the wall of a classroom? What would be your comment that you would have? So put that as a 5-star us. Give us 5 stars. Put a little comment about what would you put up there. It would be you.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. What would be
Hey, how about this? Let's get into our conversation with Mike Nelson, and then we'll come back and discuss it.
Sounds good.
You've been listening to an Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast. Today on An Imperfect Leader, Mike Nelson is my guest. Mike is the former Assistant Executive Director for Professional Learning for the Washington Association of School Administrators, or WASA. Mike is the former superintendent of Enumclaw School District, a school district he served for 21 years, 13 years as a superintendent, and a district he himself attended as a student. In 2019, he was recognized as the Washington State Superintendent of the Year. Mike, welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
Oh, it's great to be here, Peter. Thanks for asking.
Mike, when I was learning more about you, I was so inspired by what your team in Enum accomplished when it came to graduation rates, particularly among First Nations or Native students. And I read in the 2 years preceding your recognition as Superintendent of the Year that 100% of Native students in the cultural program graduated from Enumclaw High. And overall, that Native American students graduated at a rate 33 percentage points higher than the national average. So I just wonder, would you tell us a little bit about the system you and your team created to make that happen?
I appreciate being able to tell this story because I've tried to tell it a few times, but even you just sharing it just a little bit right now, it really gives me chills. I'm going to tell a little bit of the story of how we got here. I was in 8th grade. And in 8th grade at Enumclaw Junior High at the time, we had an independent math program and you studied on your own. Then you went to a different room to take a test. And in this room was a person named Sharon Calvert. Sharon would give you your test. You would take it and then you take it up to her. She would grade it and tell you how you did. And she would just say, Nelson, you got 100% again. How do you do that? And so Sharon, Mrs. Calvert, and I became fast friends in 8th grade because I really didn't study. I just went in. So math was pretty natural and easy for me. And little did I know that when I returned to Enumclaw as assistant superintendent in 1999, Sharon was a paraprofessional in our school district. And we moved. She was a member of the Muckleshoot tribe. And we moved her into building a cultural program in the Enumclaw School District. And she just was amazing in how she connected and worked with people. And during my tenure, both as assistant superintendent and superintendent, I had the front office, and our district office was nothing fancy. It was one floor. You walked in, you turned right, and you could walk right into my office. And I kept that office even as superintendent because I didn't want to break down. I didn't want to create any barriers in my leadership that would prevent people from an open, honest, transparent type of leadership model. So Sharon would come in and still call me Nelson, even for my 8th grade year. She'd come in and say, Nelson, we have a problem. I think she wrote that for Apollo 13 myself. But so Nelson, we've got a problem. She'd come in and shut the door. And little did I know she would put on, we have a child that needs this support. And here, how do we build it? And from those years of building it, we continue to build this cultural program from preschool all the way through and built a relationship between the Enumclaw School District and the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe to where we knew every single child. We knew their family. We knew their background. And we built this program. So that's one side of it from the Muckleshoot side. From the Enumclaw School District side, which is how do we build staff knowledge and understanding of the tribal customs and traditions, whether if somebody dies and a student's going to be gone for a week, we don't get frustrated. We move forward with how do we support that child during their grieving time and the traditions that they will take part in. The very first day that you're on the job in Enumclaw, you have lunch at the tribe, and they prepare a traditional customary lunch with root vegetables and salmon and fruit, and they explain why this is the food of the land. And they also talk about customs, and they talk about the students who will be entering our system. Peter, a long way to say we built the program that probably people can build for the kids, but then we also built it with the adults to change the culture and mindset of those students. And as a result, we did not let any child leave without graduating. And the tribe put money into our system because they saw it begin to work and they wanted it to be a model for others.
So when I think about the system that you created, we think about, you can almost look at it almost as a glacier, right? And at the top of that glacier, lots of actions. Below that are sort of the systems and routines that take place. And below that are the mindsets that sort of fuel all of those things. And to me, it sounds like you understood that in order for students, particularly Native students, to graduate, it was going to take a shift in mental models. And so having that at the district level, being able to recognize the traditions, the rituals, the routines, all of those pieces that are sacred, that then fuels the way that people behave. And then you start to see different actions taking place. And the key to all of that sounds like, tell me her name, because all I hear is Nelson, but
her name
Nelson,
is
we
Sharon.
have a problem.
Yeah, Sharon. So Sharon was awesome.
It sounds like Sharon was the key to all of that. And so I wonder, in your role at the state level in terms of our association here in Washington State, how do you take that learning that you had in Enumclaw and bring that to your new position, influencing superintendents all across the state of Washington?
I think that it's kind of a simple phrase, but Sharon would say it is, we need people, if they had knowledge and understanding of our cultures, they would immediately understand to have sympathy and empathy about this situation. And so I think in this role is how do we create conditions where stories are told or visitations are done so people have that true sense of knowing themselves and understanding and having that level of empathy. It just brings a whole different level of connection and therefore learning.
So it's about getting closer, right? That proximity and closer contact will help any individual make better decisions. It's probably one of the reasons why you moved or didn't move your office to a separate location. You wanted to be close to those who were going to be most impacted by your decisions.
It's me. And so that's my leadership style. It's like I wanted to be that front office. And I think the thing that I didn't mention is sometimes it's not those huge decisions, but it's just those little incidental moments. If I wouldn't be available to Sharon, she would become frustrated. That might ripple into a whole different way. But by being available and accessible to her, she knew that I was for her, or would get back to her if I wasn't in the office. He felt a whole different level of support and validated my leadership. And she sent that ripple. So to be able to stay in Enumclaw 21 years as either assistant superintendent or superintendent, I let others carry the torch. Hopefully with my decisions and what I did, they sent the ripples of positive leadership.
So let's talk about that. So in the leadership model that I use to advise others, there's a dimension called nested patterns. That's the muscle of an organization's work. And inside that dimension is a term, shared leadership. And shared leadership is not something that is easily learned. It requires really high levels of trust. And so in the examples you've already provided in terms of your relationship with Sharon and the Muckleshoot tribe, everything I've read about you is that you are always the first to give credit to the team. And so I'm wondering, what are some ways that you advise others to embrace shared leadership? And I'm kind of curious, who taught you this nested pattern?
That is a great question. I think it goes back to, I would say the person who, if I were to say one person, I would say it's my mom. Even though my mom died when I was 24 years old, her impact was huge. And she was the type of person that everybody thought they were her favorite person. Whether it's my two older brothers and myself, I was the favorite. They would say they were the favorites. People in the community, other family members. Aunt Mary I was always her favorite. And she had that knack and ability, but she was really gifted at doing the little things and the small things that just had an emotional impact. In my first year of teaching, I'd go out to my car and there'd be a box of Kleenex with a note that just says, I thought you might want a box of Kleenex for your guests. Who does that? I'd open my ashtray and there would be a $5 bill with a note from my mom. There'd be dinner on the back seat ready to cook for my wife. And it's just those little pieces. She uncannily knew not to set up her own roadblocks. And I say that, and I'm trying to describe this. I think as leaders, sometimes we might do things in ways that unintentionally that set up a roadblock for us, and a path that's not necessarily good. And she really taught about being careful about that and through those little pieces. And so for me, an example that I could give, and I get that big systems might not be able to do this, but we did not have a phone system. I rebelled against a phone system in Enumclaw. We had somebody who picked up the phone and talked with people, and my number was available and email was accessible. My office was in the front. People would say to me, how do you do that? That's going to take time away from you. And it actually was the opposite. It built a culture of respect for the superintendent. People only came when they really needed me. And I knew if they walked through the door, they really needed me. And I know that took time. And maybe the first couple of years we built that culture around that. But in the end, it was just how I led and how we built the culture that we did for students.
Mike, I'd like to ask you a question that I ask of every guest who comes on the podcast. How does the term an imperfect leader resonate with you?
I think that for me, I actually think it better describes the leader than the word that I would always use is just really trying to be the most humble and self-reflective and always holding up a mirror. I did that as a teacher. When you have a group of kids and you had a little one who maybe wasn't having their best day. I taught elementary, so I call them little ones. Maybe it wasn't their best day. Probably my mom. I never talked about that child. Why did he do that or that? It was, what could I have done differently to set this little one up differently? And what do I need to do in the future? Whether it's making sure that I'm at the door with him or having a note on her desk, or how do I do that? So I think it's that holding up the mirror and being that humble leader, and a leader that you can openly say, gosh, I think I might not have done that. And here's how I might move it forward. Having said that, I think you need to be careful not to make so many mistakes. That becomes the pattern. But doing that when it's appropriate and you have what Covey calls money in the bank, or you have that storage, people will accept that and actually appreciate it, coming forward and saying, I wasn't my best self here. Here's what I would do differently. And I think it always has to be followed with, here's what I might do differently. Does that resonate with you? Or do you have ideas of how I might have done that differently? And just put yourself out there.
And we'll be right back. Hey, district leaders, I know you already know this. In schools worldwide, cell phones are posing real challenges on student engagement and mental well-being, and I want you to meet Yonder, a proud sponsor of an Imperfect Leader. And let me share this story from a visit I made to some schools in Silicon Valley. I asked some kids what they liked about Yonder, and after some funny looks, they shared that actually, with Yonder, teachers don't have to battle with them over phones anymore. In fact, one kid said to me he didn't have to worry anymore about his parents texting him in class, and the kid next to him sort of shoved him and goes, texting? My mom used to FaceTime me in class. I want to introduce you to a support system that increases teaching and learning. I want you to discover why 1 million students choose Yonder daily. Minimize distractions, maximize learning potential. To learn more, go to overyonder.com. YONDR. We're back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader called Imperfect Leadership in After Action. My guest is Mike Nelson, former superintendent of the Enumclaw School District and former assistant executive director for professional learning for the Washington Association of School Administrators. And in this segment, we ask our guests to deconstruct a decision that they had to make, and then we discuss it. Mike, what happened?
You kind of prepped me a little bit for this question and asked me to do some reflection, which I really appreciate. I do like to reflect on things. And this is the situation, Peter, that came up into my mind over and over again. I was blessed to be hired as a 29-year-old to be a principal in a large urban school district in the state of Washington. And at that time, there wasn't a lot of people that were 29 years old leading a school, an elementary principal. And there were many staff members who were twice, if not twice plus more than my age. And I was hired. It's very fortunate. My first visit to the school, I learned that there were in the primary grades, there was a teaching of reading method that is normally designed to be used in an MTS model with some kids, not all kids, but the program was being used for every single little 6-year-old learning to read. So I put that there, Peter. But what you need to know in the background is as a teacher, I won awards for the teaching of reading. I was a national speaker on the area of literacy and met with really great, amazing leaders. So after learning this, I went to my supervisor and said, I think I need to turn down the job. I'll continue to teach. I hope this doesn't ruin my career, but I can't morally go into where my values are to be a principal of a school that has this program when I know it's only designed for a few, not all. And the assistant superintendent at the time said, that's what we hired you. And my thinking was, I wish I might have known that a little bit before this exact moment. And she just said, you could do whatever you want. So I put my age on this because I didn't have a lot of experience of confrontation, I guess is what I would call it. And I had a meeting with the first grade team, and the person who at the time was a Title I person that was leading this charge. And I just put out that I've been hired to be principal, and here's my background. And I'm not going to say you can't use it, but what I am going to say is you can't use it for all students. And it was not met kindly. And there was a lot of pushback at me. And I don't know what made me say this, but I said, if we're going to be able to move on and work together, and I know you have feelings about me, I need you to verbalize them to me. Don't verbalize them in the parking lot. I mean, even as strong as if you really dislike me, if you hate me, you need to tell me that. And both of them said, I hate you. No. And didn't quite know what to do other than I put it out on the table. And so my thinking about this, and I could tell you in the end, I love those people. They didn't leave the school. There's pride behind this story too.
I promise we're going to get to, and what was something that was good that came out of this.
It was very ugly, and it divided the staff. And I wasn't even in my first day yet. This was in the spring before my first time. So that's what I needed to deal with.
Wow. I'm thinking of anyone who is listening to this is they themselves are getting flushed thinking, oh my gosh, because any one of us who enters into our leadership roles and we see systems that are generating exactly what they're meant to, and you're probably seeing that the results were not what you would hope they would be. Now I'm going to take a quick step back and say to my mother who is listening and will email me and say, what is MTSS? So mother, that is a multi-tiered system of support, which says that as students are learning, that we are teaching all children at something called Tier 1, where we would expect 80 to 85% of our kids to all be performing well. And if they need additional support, then they go to Tier 2 in terms of additional support, and then Tier 3 if they really need intensive support. So it sounds from your example that a first grade teacher was using a strategy or materials or a program that was really designed for the intervention and not for Tier 1 instruction.
That would be correct.
Okay, so you have this situation where you are 29 years old, you're entering into a new school, you haven't even started yet, you're doing sort of your meet and greets, and you recognize that there's a problem that Tier 2 or 3 instruction is being used at the Tier 1 level, and you have significant reservations, and those who are above you say, yeah, that's why we hired you, go fix that. And you went in and said, we're going to change this. You could use it, but you can't use it for all students, and let me know how you feel about me. And they told you. Wow. What got overlooked?
In reflection, I think what I might have done, in fairness to them, I did not go and observe their classrooms before having any of this conversation. I did not ask questions in the moment within their classrooms. I did not have any type of coaching session. I just came in and blanketly made a decision. And that's counter to who I am and how I would lead. And the only thing that I could describe is that it was such an incredibly strong value in maybe my expertise. And maybe I was being so naive as a 29-year-old, which I share that because it's not tied to 29, because you could be 59 in your own new leadership and you could be naive about some of the leadership moves you made. That's what
we as leaders sometimes are impulsive, particularly if it strikes at the core of our core beliefs and our compelling purpose. We sometimes resist what we know about systems thinking, and that is to give yourself the gift of time to think about a situation before impulsively jumping in and making a decision and then having to make a mid-course correction or recover. I'm curious, what did you learn about relationships, or what new relationships were formed because of this?
Then coming home, I could remember it like it was yesterday and it was 30 years ago, is the pulling back to what are my core leadership values, and going back into their classroom and leaning into them, meaning not walking by their room and not going in, but actually going to them and having those moments as almost for a while forcing the relationship, but letting them see who I truly am as an individual and as a person, because their first impression was not very good. And to overcome first impressions is a really difficult thing. And so I knew that cognitively, even at that age, and I needed to really regroup that if I was going to move it forward. And then did I have the belief that they could do it? And that's a core value for me as a leader too. I got to believe that the person has the skills to be able to shift the situation themselves. And I have to feel that completely as I'm working through the plan. There may be a shift at some point where I need to say that it didn't work, but I have to have that. That's a core belief that I have in the beginning of a situation like this.
You had a core belief, but what I sense is that you were also leaning into what some might consider a growth mindset, that you were willing to say to yourself, this is my core belief, and I need to be in a classroom observing to maybe see whether or not that I believe to be irrefutable, but I should take the moment and the time to actually observe and get to see what is happening. And that in turn will help, as you lean into that discomfort, potentially start building those relationships. I think there's some really good takeaways for leaders who are entering into the field or thinking about the superintendency, and they're designing 30 and 60 and 90-day plans to make sure that they're taking that time to lean into those areas where they might have some discomfort. What frustrated you?
To be honest, there was no leadership that asked questions about this model before I came in. And so and that happens to leaders sometimes, often as well, that you're put into situations that you had no control over before. So if we're doing a new adoption and then you have a problem after that and you were part of that adoption, that's one problem to deal with, Peter. But this is a problem that I didn't do, I walked into. And so that was a frustration of how did we get to this point? And you almost have to, for me, I almost had to compartmentalize it. I can spend some time whining about it and in my own little way, but I need to put it aside because we are where we are. And then how do I help move that staff forward?
When I think about the question of what could you have done differently, you have somewhat answered that in that it may have been a wiser approach as you were entering into this new position, regardless of age, in terms of experience, to get to know the people who are going to be impacted by the decisions you make. Clearly from segment one, when we were just talking about your leadership style, which is very much shared leadership, very much being close to where decisions are made, that you've learned a lot from this experience and then applied it to your subsequent leadership roles. I'm curious what else you could have done differently if, in fact, you think that there was anything else that you could have done.
I think it's maybe a little bit about what I did after. I was putting my values before their values without listening to what their values were. And what I mean by that, Peter, is that I didn't ask them, why is this program so important to you? What is it about this that you're so emotionally tied to it and feel so strongly that it is the right thing to do? I didn't do that and was able to do that in subsequent conversations. I was able to do that. And I think having led by that would have set a different tone. I probably wouldn't have gotten the "I hate you" statement, then go a bit different.
In the end, though, what was something that was good that came out of the situation? I'm hoping that "I hate you" was turned into something else.
I learned so much from this grade level team. And I mean that so strongly. What I learned was somewhere they opened up to listen. I think one of the pieces is you showing them. So I love teaching reading. They allowed me to be in their classroom. They allowed me to do model lessons. They were very proud of their results. And so they showed me what the results were. So in the area of reading, they showed me that kids could spit out this many words a minute. And so their rate was there. And so they were using that type of data, or they could do flashcards of sight words. Awesome. Those are all important indicators of what makes a good reader. But when I said, if you were to ask the child, what is it that they just read? What's the response? That's not part of our evaluation. And I said, let's just give it a go. And when students, not just one or two, weren't able to do that body language with it, that you've made an impact, where there's almost like this deep breath and they look up and almost lean back. I can see them doing that in that moment. And it was an aha. And I said, so can I help? Can I be a part of your team? And at that point, they opened up and said yes. And they went on to have amazing test scores that were built on different things, and particularly being able to make meaning from the printed word, which there's lots of indicators that help you make meaning from a printed word. So rate and fluency are important indicators as well. Comprehension is also a key.
Right. To understand the arc of a story and to see how characters change over time. Those are important parts of being able to actually understand what you're reading and to be able to draw meaning and to then think critically about the world. You can't get there if you don't have rate and fluency. But rate and fluency aren't the be all and end all. They go together. And that is that's a really vivid description, particularly as you described sort of the leaning back and there's something I can learn from this guy.
Well, and we learned together. And what I learned from them, where I started, Peter, was I want to be, and they're probably my age now. They probably were older than what I currently am at. I think they were in their 60s and I just turned 60, and that they were there, and how they could get themselves to trust me, to be with me, and to be a team with me. I hope I would do that for someone else. I mean, I'm in awe of that.
You're really speaking also to the superintendent, the role of the superintendent, and the ability to be present and persistent in terms of your presence. And that will fuel conversation and understanding. And that will then maybe, quite possibly, likely lead to trust. And that's where it sounds like you got there. There was a level of trust, and to be comfortable enough to make sure that you're really present and always there with real honor and value of the people that you serve. Mike, what advice would you give to an aspiring leader?
So much.
Well, look, it's a 30-minute podcast. So what's one piece of advice you would give to a leader?
I have a son who's now a building leader here, building principal in a middle school. And that's thrilling to have. And I say that because at the dinner table, my brothers and I all went into education. And my parents, my mom in particular, would always say this phrase, and I will never forget it. There's no more noble of a profession than that of an educator. That just oozed from her mouth, and was like, we knew we were going to be educators. So in answering your question, I think I go back to my mentor, my strong mentor, and my mom. And I think I would probably just say 3 words: see the good. See the good.
My guest again was Mike Nelson. And Mike, I know you get real joy from designing and implementing professional learning, and you do it because you have this genuine interest in helping leaders be better today than they were yesterday and better tomorrow than they are today. And it's clear from our conversation today, truly, it's true that there is no profession more noble than that of a teacher. But I would refer to what you've described as a compelling purpose, and it's a really noble one. And that's because in the end, really, the children win when educational leaders are at their best. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
It was a privilege. Thank you.
We are back. We
are.
If it's okay, can we start with, because we entered the conversation talking about people who have been helpful that we've observed. So your writing teacher for me, for those who served as homeschool communicators and school counselors, really just seeing the above and beyond work that goes beyond education, even for your teacher, that's part of her role as a teacher. And I still think it goes to a deeper depth of understanding individual children and lifting them up. So in Michael Nelson's story, in his interview, he talks about Sharon, right?
Yeah.
And what jumped out to you in terms of...
First, it's that I didn't even consider this as a prerequisite or a caveat to the quality of this person that does this for kids, but it's length of time. She did it for him as a student and then was still there working for her community when he became the superintendent. Wow.
I know.
This woman, that is dedication.
Yes. And the fact that she saw him in their relationship in terms of hierarchy. He's this kid and he's coming to take these math tests and Nelson.
Yeah,
Nelson,
exactly. And then he stays Nelson because the hierarchy isn't based on title, which he understood. That was the whole office part. Like,
I love that.
I'm not
that's a
office.
good point, because you could see where someone would say, I'm the superintendent now. And no, he respected and understood the relationship isn't about title. You don't lead with title.
And you're profound. Accessible. You're fully accessible. I loved that. I loved the advocacy that she held onto for her own community. And he talks about, God, I can't remember the exact quote, but he talks specifically about, well, I couldn't do that because it would be seen as an affront to her and the community, even though it might have seemed logical. And that is him understanding the community that he's working in, the bridging of I thought it was profound.
After hearing you say that, it made me think even more deeply about his after action review. So here he is as a new principal, trying to figure out the role of leadership. And I wonder, in that moment, was he leading with title? Because he walked in and saw a reading program that was, in his mind, typically used as an intervention, although was using as a tier 1 universal treatment. And before learning about how it was being used and how teachers were working with kids, he made a statement and a judgment and a declaration that, no, we're not going to use that. And then said, and before you start talking about me in the parking lot, which I cringed when you told me it the first time, and then listening to it again, you can tell me you don't like me. And they said, okay, we don't like you.
Yeah, I loved that. No, they said, we hate you.
Oh, that's right. You can tell me you hate me. Okay, we hate you.
Oh, my goodness gracious. So, I mean, it made me, what a great example of naive leadership. I think he uses that word. It is, I can't think of the number of times that I've done that, where I've been like, oh, I know. I mean, it's so condescending. Like, I walk in and it's not like, I know. I actually could tell you how instruction should work. I know that. I know how instruction works. I know where you should be focused, how you should be focused, how to use data and all that. No, it doesn't matter.
Right. You're not giving people directions to your home where it's do this, do this. Right.
No. And
you're living together
in what they're doing.
And so, exactly. And they have dedicated their lives. And so you're asking to change a mindset or to collaborate and share in leadership, and we forget sometimes. And so it really is, when I think about the habits of system thinking, once again, it's avoiding that impulse to make a quick decision and not anticipating the unintended consequence of our words and our actions. And in that case, the unintended consequence was, it could have been a long-term damaged relationship. Through his own reflection and his own work, being in classrooms and working together and modeling lessons and watching and standing in awe of great teaching, they were able to resolve that. And I think that's a great lesson for any of us in leadership, whether we're new superintendents, whether we are veteran superintendents, whether we're taking on new school districts as leaders. So many leaders right now are about to start their new year in a new position with their new faculties and their new staff and their new community. Mm-hmm. So it goes back to that, how do you make people feel? No one cares about what you know. They want to know how you make them feel. And so then you can get to, what do you know?
This just happened. Can I share a personal connection really quickly?
Please do.
This just happened. I had a meeting with a high school principal who wants me to come and support their staff this year, specifically around reinvigorating their PLC work and their instruction. And he's the reason I knew that we wanted to go outside, and I just felt like you do such a good job of making us all feel thoughtful, successful, reflective. And he's like, and everything he described about what I do and what I know had nothing to do with PLCs or instruction, though that's the focus area. Everything he asked, and I'm like, this is a compliment. I've made him feel good about being a learner. Maybe I'm full circle here, back to Joe Greiner, because that's what she did for me.
I love that. What a good way to end. So the last thing I want to say is Mike Nelson and Peter DeWitt, they are working together. They have an amazing newsletter that really lifts up the learning that's happening all over the world, I'd say, because I know they travel to Australia and do sessions with leaders. And so I really would encourage people to check out their newsletter, their website, their work. It just was a true joy to spend time with him.
Nice. We should ask Mike Nelson if we can have Peter DeWitt on the
Oh, how about that?
on the podcast.
All right, Mike, I know you're listening. Let's have them both. They can talk about their
That actually would be super fun. That would be really fun.
Okay, we'll invite them.
Okay.
You've been listening to an Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast. I'm Peter Stiepelman.
And I'm Jamie Almanzan.
We will see you next week. Take care, Jamie.
See you later.
Music for An Imperfect Leader was written and arranged by Ian Varley. Sam Falbo created our artwork, a wood print inspired Daruba doll butterfly. Remember, imperfect leadership is not a scarlet letter. It's a badge of honor. It recognizes that serving as a lead learner is about being a vulnerable leader, an empathetic leader, a compassionate leader. We are proud to be imperfect leaders, so join us next time for another episode of An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast.